Wilson once proclaimed, we cannot be separate in interest or divided in purpose. We must stand together until the bitter end, and alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. The United States is the melting pot of the world, and we can no longer sit idle as we blatantly ignore our problems at home and watch as America decline for another year. We the people must take decisive action, rise above our differences, and forge a new path for America's future. It is because the opposition believes that we should be debating urgent modern-day issues instead of 40-year problems that have been plaguing our nation, and that we should offer solutions to solve these problems. We are proud to propose a motion. All American high schools should create and mandate cultural competency curriculums, or CCC for short. I'll begin by providing some framing for our argument and then moving on to introduce two substantive arguments of the motion. First, our stance and two definitions. The proposition believes that CCC is necessitated by the current state of hatred, division, institutions, and handling of minority issues. We recognize that conditions such as police brutality, gun violence, biased justice system, gender pay gaps, the rise of white supremacy, and many more have made it increasingly difficult for minority groups to escape oppressive policies and to enter a world of equality and tolerance. Furthermore, CCC are classes designed to educate students about the understanding and navigating differences in race, gender, etc. The term minority also includes any racial, sexual, or economic minorities. Next, our model CCC will be implemented content, new learning flexibilities for advanced students, and vetting all members and staff. CCC funding will be achieved through a higher tax rate on wealthy individuals, political parties and campaigns, and private prison, military, and arms corporations. Finally, the burdens on today's debate. The opposition proved that A, there is a reason to deny the next generation leaders the right to learn about the injustices facing us and to treat other groups as humans with dignity, respect, and as equals. And B, there is no need for change given the current issue in America, such as discrimination or mass shootings motivated by hatred for others. Substantive 1. Cultural competency curriculum is our country's future and will serve as a path of peace between different groups of people. The white majority won't be the majority soon. According to a U.S. Census Bureau that estimates that minorities will comprise about 37% of the population currently, while the population of over half of 60% by 2050. If our youth, whom are the successors of the world, don't know how to overcome our differences, become accepting, and work as one united country, historians expect a vicious clash between us in the future. Generation Z will also develop tolerance and having an open mind, leading to less discrimination and violent hate crimes. According to data from the Gun Violence Archive, as of August 8, 2019, there have been 254 mass shootings in the United States, including Gilroy, California, on July 28, 2019, inspired by a plot for domestic terrorism. Dayton, Ohio, on August 4th, fascinated by violent ideologies. In El Paso, Texas, on August 3rd, motivated by an intense hatred for Hispanics. These 254 shootings have taken the lives of 288 innocent souls. Furthermore, an article by the Washington Post wrote that 1,164 people have been killed by the police in 2018. In situations where no crime was committed, African Americans comprised of a majority of those killed, despite being only an eighth of the population. Some notable instances would be the shooting of Philando Castile in 2016, Eric Garner, and Alton Sterling. Lest we forget. African Americans are also the target of crimes and drugs, with more than one-third of the prison population being African American, and white males just taking up less than 30%. Anytime there's a bigger percent of a group in prison than their actual population, that's a frightening figure, and these statistics show an eerie trend of discrimination, racism, and cruelty in our country. A majority of states also whitewash and censor large parts of class curriculum in all classes. For example, in history, stories about Columbus, colonialism, and stories of America's misdeeds during the 1800s and 1900s. The Teaching Tolerance Organization study showed that standards in school boards would be a big disservice to students by blocking out the truth and teaching our children lies. Many school boards across the country would be obliterating the genuine purpose of any history to expose students to diverse and often conflicting perspectives. If we teach children about what happens in the real world, cultural curriculum also increases the quality of education. The CCC encourages kids to learn more about the world. If we teach children what happens in the real world, the rest is up to human instinct. It will spark their curiosity, and the result is kids being interested in learning and desiring to make a change in today's world. This creates a scenario in today's society where fighting and advocating for their beliefs. CCC also creates a safe environment for kids to learn and discuss differences. Impact. Currently, America is on a path towards catastrophe. Preventing our youth from learning the truth and teaching them how to be good human beings and be open-minded and accept all of our differences is not just morally unjust, but it violates their freedom to learn. Our institution shouldn't be censoring what's really happening, and we should be direct and honest instead. Implementing the cultural competence curriculum will not only boost the quality of education, but also teaches students how to overcome issues plaguing our nation. They are the future, and we must push them in the right direction so our country can see and not return to the dark ages. We must understand that if you take away the labels, we're more alike than we are different. I urge a ballot for the proposition, and it's about time that we via racism.
Did you get the pun?
Or racism.
I was trying to say.
It's about time we are racism. Okay. Thank you, Prop 1, for that speech. Now I'll call upon the offline. Here, here. Hansi, you guys are speaker.
There is always a solution to everything. But however, in the case of the proposition, they seem to forget that cultural competency curriculum is not the correct solution to solving the roots of systematic racism. And because the opposition believes that implementing such material will only harm the student base, we are proud to oppose this proposition. This House believes that all American high schools should create and mandate cultural competency curriculum. But before I begin getting into my points, I'd first like to provide a few points on framing, briefly go over my opponent's case. So first, our stance is that we believe this cultural representation of all culture is extremely important, whether it be a mainstream or minority culture. And the burden the proposition has to prove is that the side that wins is the side that benefits the student population the most in cultural representation as well. So first, let's go over our opponent's case. In their first point, they say that this will lead to a future and more peaceful community for people of all different races. However, this is simply not going to happen. As we can see that the teachers who are going to teach these classes simply won't do this in that many of these teachers who are going to teach these classes will not actually accurately represent their minority groups. And as we stated before, it will actually not affect these minority groups. And this will actually not change the perspective of our racism because there are two key issues that we come up with this argument. So first, the likelihood of a high school student actually paying attention to the class is very low. As in the status quo, a student's attention span is only about 10 to 15 minutes before losing their focus, and they won't be able to change their perspective as my opponents claim, because they won't actually have the key lesson each day. And second, although students' mind will change based on one adult, they've had basically their whole life to groups. And just one mere class will not actually do much to change their perspective on all of these minorities. But next, on their second point, they talk about how this will inspire others to continue to learn other subjects. But again, this is simply false, as just simply a class about culture will not actually inspire other students to actually go into other subjects. As there are already multiple other classes in high school that the high schools already offer, and just one class does not make a significant amount of impact to actually bring about these changes that they're promising. But next, let's get into our case. And our first point is that it takes away the much needed time that these students have in their high school career. So essentially, what is happening right now in the status quo is that many of these children throughout the country are in school between 9th and 12th grade. They don't have the time to complete the required assignments they have from other classes. And although yes, that we will agree that this comes from social media and other instances, the vast amount of time that is spent on this platform, however, there is no solution to properly solve this problem. As the Business Insider in 2018 already explains that teachers don't have much control as they used to, and children who are not allowed to use their phones in class still use their phones. For example, many students have an overpowering extracurricular activity schedule, which proves that it's not just social media too, where they are also constantly out of the house. Around 76% of the US teens in high school only end up reaching their homes by 9 p.m., which already cuts down their sleep time and decreases the amount of time that they have to work. But second, this leads to an increase of stress for these students. So already in the present, 70% of the high school teens in America's experience have stress and depression as a major problem occurring in their lives. And adding more work and stress into their lives just to learn about this will just increase this number, which may even lead to an increase of debts and depressions. And this is something that we must take into account. Rather than adding into more classes and more stress, it is necessary to have such classes not implemented at all. but realize that the opposition solves this problem, as one of my opponent's main flaws is that they don't take into account that there are already existing culture classes that come along with language classes, such as French and Spanish, but they can also learn about other cultures too. But the only difference is that these students have a choice of whether or not they want to learn about the culture. Our second substantive is that the implementation of these classes are not going to be effective at all, as the class material won't be sufficient and teachers won't be trained, which leads to an uneducated class. As of now, there are roughly 40,000 high schools in America, and thus to ensure that curriculum is actually taught well, the school system must find at least 40,000 people who are actually first trained in the field, second are interested in becoming a teacher, and finally, that they don't harbor any sort of bias against any minority. Clearly, this is an unrealistic idea, as if even one of these teachers are biased against a minority, this will not only hamper the curriculum for people going to that high school, but it will also hamper the ability for students who go to that high school for years to come. And finally, this will only exacerbate the racial divide. However, realize that there isn't one single culture for every racial group. For example, for African people, people from Haman and Somalia have drastically different cultures, and this is also seen in countries such as India and China, where we're just grouping these things into one racial divide will not actually solve the problem. And for these reasons, we are proud to oppose.
A tsunami of current issues are plaguing our country, from extreme racial bias to prejudice among social classes. Implementing cultural competency curriculums means educating, reforming, and improving, something the opposition fails to realize. I would like to begin this speech with an extension to my partner's substantives. Substantive 1 shows that the curriculum is exactly what we need for national improvement and will provide peace between many different societal groups. Extending my partner's evidence that there will be an estimated 20% rise of minorities in the next 40 years if action is yet to be taken. If peoples worldwide are not fully educated about the modern troubles, America can only wait for tensions to increase and no action to be done. The FBI showed in 2017 about 7,000 hate crime incidents were reported, and 1,000 of them were based on sexual orientation bias. Will spark their curiosity about causing a change for our nation because they realize what is going wrong and what they are doing wrong, so how they can improve from this is up to them. 2, creating a safe educational environment for kids. This creates a safe educational environment for kids where differences can be discussed rather than demoted, which outweighs your point of stress. This is discussion-oriented. It is not a homework textbook kind of class. And 3rd, this provides an unbiased vision for all pupils nationwide. As school textbooks tend to hide the truth due to fear of offending students, cultural competency classes trains the teachers to promote awareness without antagonization. Now my substantive 3, cultural competency classes break down barriers that are set by the modern society. I have 2 points to this. Initially, these specially designed curriculums teach individuals how to work with people of different races, religions, and ethnic backgrounds in the real world. With 4 major races, over 4,000 religions, and a wide variety of social classes, only when students are actually educated about this matter can they use it to their benefit as an adult. My subpoint 2, educators misinform students about race, ethnicity, nationality, class, gender, and religion, like shown in textbooks, as many people generate false and offensive stereotypes targeted towards specific groups of people. This creates an unhealthy learning environment in school. Through these curriculums, however, as students realize that others' lives are not so different from their own, they will choose acceptance over opposition. Moreover, many teachers and students are highly supportive of this. According to Superintendent Karen Hall, by cultivating a safe atmosphere and promoting an open dialogue, we will help our students and staff process these difficult events with sensitivity and respect. Furthermore, a Lakota teen that was once a victim of bias herself states that if people want to help us, they have to see what we've been through, not from what their experiences tell them. This is exactly what the curriculums are designed to do, because they can share their own experiences and actually use that as a starting foundation to improve from it. Now, my opponent's case. First of all, they say there isn't always a solution. Our point is not to 100% eliminate racism and all the problems in the world, because we do realize that is very impossible. But our point is that we just want to reduce the hate crimes. We just want to educate the students and raise cultural awareness. And we also, and I've never proved an alternative solution that is more reliable than these curriculums. Also, you say the teachers won't represent minorities. Again, these teachers are trained to do this, and you can't just make an assumption because they are white or whatever that they are definitely going to be prejudiced. Now also, you say they have a 10-minute attention span. Well, if you're saying this could apply to any class, not just cultural curriculum classes. If you say this, that means many classes like math or reading should also be eliminated. So are you supporting the end of education itself? Also, you say that grade 9 through 12, the people have no time and they spend like 76% of their time away from home already, but you have no evidence to justify this claim. Also, you could argue this about any classes, so thus our point overrides yours. Now you say that they also learn about this in language classes, such as French. French is only about that one country. This is not all-inclusive like many of these classes. Now, Judge, I would like to impact this debate out. First of all, I never heard an impact from their side, but our impact is very high on both probability and magnitude. Initially, many violent acts, as mentioned in our speech, take thousands of lives a year, such as police brutality, affecting the magnitude of the entire country because every person is at risk. The probability of these events continuing if cultural competency curriculum is not enforced is extremely high because they are already happening all around America. Judge Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Are the rising rates of hate crimes and lack of understanding for societal differences what you wish to witness? We cannot stand for this, and please vote proposition. Thank you.
I thank the second proposition speaker and welcome the second opposition.
Give me one sec. Alright, I'm good.
So let's start off on their case where they tell you that we have two verdicts. First, to prove that it's the right to learn, but second, that there's no need for change. Two responses is, first, we're not proving that we're not denying their right to learn. We're just saying that these cultural competency classes aren't the right way to solve racism, and in fact, they're actually going to increase racism, as I'll prove later on in my speech. Second, when they tell us that we need to prove that there's no need for change, that is not our point, and that's also an abusive framework. We need change, but that change shouldn't take place in form of cultural competency classes, as I'll again prove later on in my speech. Let's move on to the first subpoint, which is the first substantive, which is inequality. Here are a couple of responses that they didn't respond to in their second speech. First, that these math students are horrifying, but the solution isn't CCCs. Here, let's go on to my third substantive, which is again implementation of these classes. Here you can extend part of my speech, which tells you that there are currently 40,000 high schools in America, and in order to ensure that the curriculum is taught, we need to make sure that there's 40,000 people who want to train in this field. Second, are interested in becoming a teacher and don't have any racial bias. Continue, that this is an unrealistic concept, as even if one of these teachers are biased, then that skews the entire curriculum. Also, currently in the status quo, even if we provided special training to the teachers, that would already be very expensive, then it's impossible to generalize and say that every teacher is perfect. But if we do so, then that's just increasing the gap for the racial divide and allowing for cultural misunderstanding, especially where in the status quo, the education system in itself is already trying to turn inhumane actions like slavery into quote-unquote workers and trying to transform issues into the American favor. Here, extend this on my opponent's argument when they talk about how currently the American education is already whitewashing stories. Turn this argument, because this whitewashing will also apply into these cultural competency classes, meaning that these cultural competency classes will actually fail to provide the sort of education that they're talking about, because they even state themselves that the current American system is whitewashed. Next, let's move on to their second substantive, which is increased education. When they talk about how this is going to spark their curiosity and this is going to fight for their advantage, first of all, realize that this essentially won't happen just because of a one-year class on cultural competency. That won't make sure that entire racism is brought down. That's just simply unrealistic. Here, let's cross-apply what I said before about how these classes won't solve issues like racism in the long run. Here in the status quo, there are already many people harboring false ideologies as the years go on. My opponents come here and try to tell you that the curriculum will help other people understand different cultures, but the unreliability of this sort of system is just not worth the risk. It's not hard for people to unintentionally try to become one. It's not hard for people to intentionally try to become these teachers just to spread false stereotypes and rumors simply because of their individual race beliefs. Because this system is A, whitewashed, and B, the teachers won't have enough training, and C, the curriculum overall will be skewed towards white supremacy. For this, we can't impose cultural competency classes. Next, let's move on to my case, where our opponent says that although there's a solution, they're just trying to reduce hate crimes. Here, cross-apply my entire third substantive that tells you that that's not what they do, and the solution isn't going to be CCCs, and instead we can impose other alternatives. Even if we don't know them right now, and even if we can't provide them right now, this is just simply isn't the way to go, and we've proven that this is actually going to increase racism in the long run. Here, in my first substance, they give you 3 responses. First, that this is going to apply to any class. Second, there's no evidence. And third, that it's not inclusive. First of all, we're talking about the core classes that are providing stress to the students, but we're talking about this extracurricular class that will take away one of the students' core classes and will therefore detriment their education, taking their attention away from the things that they need to focus on, and instead giving them more and more stress. They tell you that there's no evidence in the status quo, but if we look at the suicide rates currently going up because of high school stress, if we look at the statistics that tell us that high school students are getting increasingly less and less sleep every day, it's imperial that we don't impose these cultural competency classes so that these students get even more stressed. Here, next, let's move on to our second substantive, where the response that they give you is that the teachers are trained to do this. But that's just a statement that they give. They don't give any warranting behind this, whereas we give you warranting that currently the system is whitewashed, and this whitewashness will also cross-apply into these cultural competency classes. Therefore, you should weigh off of our substantive and not their alternative. Next, when my opponent talks about impact calculus, they're telling you that the shootings and hate crimes are bad. We totally agree. These shootings and hate crimes are killing people. But what we're telling you is that these cultural competency classes will actually increase this. If you want that, then vote prop. However, if you want a world right now that even if there's racism and you don't want to increase it, in that case, that's where you have to vote ag. For this reason, vote prop.
Alright, wait one second. Can we have like POIs? There haven't been any POIs the last 2 speeches.
Like after we clap, or like y'all should be keeping track of the timer by yourselves, but like just make sure that you're also standing in the bathroom.
Yeah. Oh wait, we're done with POIs. Okay, I think the op 2 and now call upon the op 3. Here.
Ready? So I'm first going to be starting off on comparing both of this world. Judge, if you look at towards the prop side, they tell you that they're going to be solving for many of these, they're telling you that they're going to be helping many of these people, lowering hate crimes. However, we tell you this is simply not true. You can't vote off of that because, as my partner has already stated in her second speech, we actually prove that hate crimes are going to be increasing if we actually do implement these CCC classes in the long term. Hate crimes are going to be increasing. We're going to be seeing a decrease of population, an increase of suicide rates in the long term because of stress. You can't vote off of that. Instead, you should prefer our world where we tell you that we are actually going to be helping these people in the long term because first of all these students are already learning about these cultures due to their peer influence, due to their already available classes such as their French classes and their Spanish classes. We tell you these cultures are already being enforced into their lives. You can't vote off of their world instead of vote off of ours. Moving on to their first substantive, moving on to our attacks on their burdens. You can't vote off of their burdens because we tell you that our entire case proves that we are actually going to be helping these people in the long term. They tell you that their first burden is that these people have a right to learn. We tell you that yes, these people have a right to learn, but they are already learning through their core classes. They don't need these CCC classes that are just going to be enforcing even more stress onto their lives. You can't vote off that burden. And second, their second burden is completely abusive. Yes, we need change, but we're not actually changing through CCCs. We need other alternatives. And as a result, you can't vote off of their second burden. Moving on to their first substantive, extend that, yes, we agree that many of these mass shootings that my opponents are talking about are extremely horrifying. However, these improper training of these teachers are actually just going to make it worse in the long term. So essentially, you can't can't vote off of that. Instead, you should vote off of our argument where we tell you that without looking for these teachers that are just going to hurt these people, we should be looking, we should actually just be focusing on the status quo as of right now. We should be focusing on these teachers that are actually making a difference in these students' lives. That's why you have to vote off of our argument. Moving on, they talk about how there are whitewashed stories. Yes, we agree. These are extremely whitewashed stories that are occurring in the status quo. That is what needs to be changed, not by implementing CCCs. Instead, we need to be focusing on what is. Instead, we need to be focusing on how exactly these. On what exactly is going to be happening in the status quo. So essentially, we are outweighing on scope and magnitude because we are affecting the entire country in the long term because we affect even more people. These my opponents talk about how they're going to be decreasing hate crimes. That doesn't happen. So instead, you have to vote off of us because we are affecting more people and thus we urge an opposition vote.
So to start off, I want to go ahead and state that the opposition is doing nothing to solve what's happening in the real world. Yes, they can see that mass shootings are terrible. Yes, we also agree, but they aren't doing anything to solve this. However, the proposition has given several reasons that show that we are solving these problems by cultural competency classes. Next, I want to go ahead and go over some of the core issues that have been discussed in today's debate round. So first, they say that the classes will be ineffective and whitewashed. So first of all, we stated in our opinion that these teachers will be unbiased. Second of all, there's no way to ensure all high school teachers for all subjects will be effective. However, are we going to eliminate all classes with this logic? No, so there's no reason to eliminate cultural competency classes. Next, we've already stated that these classes will be discussion oriented, so this isn't adding to their stress. Next, they say that hate crimes actually go up with cultural competency classes. However, my response to this is that they haven't provided any more. How is educating people on the real world issue going to result in an increase on hate crimes? I simply don't understand this logic. Next, I want to ask the question, what does the problem look like? Overall, our plan generally benefits America's future and brings a couple of advantages and impacts. First of all, we provide a higher quality education. We know that lots of education and curriculums are whitewashed. Just to name some, we haven't learned about the St. Creek Massacre, Zoot Rise, African torture, Yellow Pearl, and many more scenarios where white supremacy was used to terrorize people of culture today. Not only racial minorities are hurt, minorities such as the LGBTQ community and women still face challenges such as unequal pay and oppression. If we want to end the cycle of hatred and vision, then it is critical we ensure the next generation is adequately educated on this in a safe space such as the classroom. Secondly, we decrease poisonous hatred and division in America. We've already seen how our country is institutionally flawed, as my partners have brought up. One of my partners stated many acts of crime and violence such as police brutality, institutional racism, biased incarceration, unequal pay, and many more injustices minorities face. Let's look at what actions are caused by the discord in the U.S. at the moment that our opposition does not solve for. First of all, hate crimes. We've seen so many mass shootings that have taken away many innocent lives, such as the El Paso mass shooting that happened very recently. The shooter, Patrick Cruzius, grew up in my hometown and in my neighborhood. And I believe that if we had educated him differently, he would not have chosen to kill the 22 people he did. Police brutality from Dexter Griffin, 18, to Eric Logan, 54. Innocent black men of all ages are being killed for being perceived as a threat. We believe it is critical that children learn about this because the next generation of police will be enabled to reform their ways and essentially save lives in America. Institutional racism. We can see this in the Emily replication of all this movement. Although they had the exact same regimen, companies still preferred white-sounding names. To conclude, our plan makes the next generation more culture-aware, which will bring a positive impact to our world by saving lives and reforming our policies. I want to briefly go over weighing the most important value you should weigh this round upon is cyclicality. If we do not enforce the proposition's plan, this cycle of hatred and division will continue from when it first arose 40 years ago. Also with this round upon magnitude, the prompt plan positively impacts everybody, especially minorities in America, and everybody that will live in America was ensured a better future when we enforce cultural competency curriculum. Thank you, and I urge a ballot for the proposition to erase racism.
Okay, we are going to defer as we do
banish you, but since there are too many of you and a little of us, we are going to banish ourselves.
We'll be back in a few minutes.